I was listening to JT's show on Sirius, and a lot of them were saying that this definitely brings LeBron to the echelon of, okay, he's like a little bit at the Bird contention now. Well, what's your opinion on that?
Why are we so obsessed with ranking? That's my
right,
opinion,
right.
honestly.
Absolutely.
I mean, how about this? Can we let the guy finish his career?
Absolutely. Premature evaluation.
My thing too is like in terms of the ranking, the truth is with, like, because it's all based on next Jordan, and is he at that level? Could he? The truth is LeBron or Kobe or whoever will never pass Jordan until we as a collective decide we are ready and okay with somebody passing Jordan. Because the game is rigged. Nobody wants there to be another Michael Jordan. The whole thing.
Why do you say that?
Because he's an icon that a lot of writers loved and respected. As they came up as sports fans, he's achieved this. It's the equivalent of beating your dad, like that point where you can actually beat your dad in a game. And I remember one time watching a tennis match. It was between, who was it? I think it was Sampras. Oh no, it was Agassi and McEnroe.
Right.
And Agassi was kicking the shit out of McEnroe, and you could tell it was breaking his heart. He got no pleasure out of this because this was his idol.
His hero.
And he was crushing him. And I don't think people are ready, emotionally to wrap their head around the idea of another Jordan. And I'm not saying LeBron's past him or whatever. Again, I don't really care.
Right.
But I don't think people want it to happen. Because all people ever do when they bring up, Kobe or LeBron or whoever it is into this conversation is to bring up reasons why they're not Jordan. It's always for that reason.
Absolutely, because it's almost like the trolling. What's your reaction to what Andy said as far as for we're not ready yet?
I get where I object to it is like there's that disconnect between. We all know, you can look at LeBron. He's 28 years old. He's been to the finals 4 times. He's, putting up video game numbers in an era where nobody is doing what he's doing.
4 MVPs,
right.
Is it?
Yeah.
And you can say he's going to be, if nothing weird happens, he's going to be one of the 5 best players of all time, if not, one of the 2 or 3.
Right.
But people are going to get caught up and obsessed with the idea of, did he win 4 rings? Did he win 5 rings? As if the first finals he got to in 2007 should have counted.
I consider him having gone to the finals 3 times.
That was a terrible
I don't count
team. That team had no business being
right.
in the finals. He got them there, and they got killed as they should have. And so,
the starters he had were Z, Gooden, I think Larry Hughes, and Sasha Pavlovich.
Right, and Mr. Curly Fries. What's his name?
Varejao.
Right.
Are you kidding me? Like, how the hell are they supposed to even get a game off San Antonio, much less beat them?
And when I was at the blog,
right.
the black and white blog, Lakers time,
That's a great way of putting
right,
it.
that's the way I have to refer to it. That's when I used to be really active, but it got to a point where it's like, dude, you guys haven't even given this fucking kid a chance. He's like a demigod right now,
right.
but just like on Red Bull.
Right.
And some of it's just the he's in part a media creation. He was people debate some of this, whether he is or he isn't, but he really is sort of the first guy to kind of come up through 24-hour media, grow in social media where the hype machine, there's a need to keep people, they have time to fill. So you make somebody like LeBron bigger than he is, you anoint him in certain ways, and I understand why a lot of fans around basketball would be turned off by that, because
right.
Wait for him to win something, before you declare him the greatest thing ever. But at the same, it's like we let him finish his career, like Andy was saying, but also too, you can't get so hung up in every single number, like count the rings or this or that or whatever, so that you ignore what's in front of you, and what's in front of you is the guy's incredible, and and he's getting better, and he's fixing problems in his game, and he's worked on his jump shot, which we all saw.
Absolutely.
In the finals. And he's he sees the floor like like Magic Johnson. He's just really good, and kind of accept it, live with it, and we don't have to figure out exactly if he's the greatest player ever in the first decade.
How about let him turn 30?
Right. because God knows what he's going to smash or what may happen the other way.
Yeah, I just,
He's reached that point where he's going to be the MVP every year unless he gets hurt or writers get bored giving him the MVP. That's how good he is. I mean,
Absolutely.
in any given year, it's going to be very difficult to make at least a statistical argument for anybody
unless
else.
somebody else just takes one hell of a leap.
Right. Just
Durant takes a hell of a
career
leap.
year, whatever. But it's almost that's where LeBron is. He's that much better than everybody else.
I don't know how you guys feel about this, but is Miami Lakers Southeast? Due to the lineage of Pat Riley.
Oh, I thought you meant in
applying.
terms of buying teams,
Right.
Because that's
Spending the way they
until
do.
the super team existed in Miami. This is what the Lakers did.
all the time.
I've talked about this before. I remember when Brian and I were co-hosting at ESPN LA 710,
Right.
talking about the Dodgers. When they made that massive trade to bring over Gonzalez and Josh Beckett. This is on the heels of giving $42 million to Yasiel Puig and all the money they were spending. And
That's working out all right for Puig.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But
Better than the Ether money.
Right.
But we were talking about Brian brought up the idea of our Laker fans, our Dodger fans, going to be okay with the idea of being Yankees West. And I was like, I think they are because as a Laker fan, I've watched the Lakers do similar things in terms of building their team. And you're always okay with it when it's your team. You can justify it
Absolutely.
and rationalize it when it's your team. When it's everybody else's team, they're the devil.
Yeah, but for all the talk about Miami buying championships and this and that, their payroll isn't even. It's
As high.
70% of what the Lakers is. I mean, the Lakers.
A lot of dudes took pay cuts.
The Lakers have a payroll that still goes beyond everyone. It's not money well spent right now, but it's still beyond what everybody else does. I mean.
I don't know if this is fair, but
It is tough for Lakers fans to be too critical of Miami for quote unquote buying a title.
Right.
When they brought in Shaq, they pay for everybody, they keep everybody because
paid
they
Malone
can pay them
$6
more.
million.
Right, all that kind of stuff. So
But I feel like a lot of people fail to realize, like Clipper fans, you hate KG, but the moment the option is KG,
as soon as he's
you
your
love
guy,
it already,
absolutely.
right?
You love him when he's on your team.
I had a hard time in 04 in the beginning being okay with Karl Malone being there. That was hard for me in the beginning because I disliked him a lot because those Jazz teams tended to take out the Lakers en route to getting taken out by the Bulls in the finals.
Kobe airballed.
Yeah, it pissed me off. And Peyton I always kind of liked, and he was one of my favorite players, so I was good with Peyton. But Malone took me a while. I ended up having a ton of respect for him by the end because he really played on one leg and busted his ass to get through it, and I think put up with a lot going on with Shaq and Kobe, and I grew to really respect Malone. But in the beginning, I was not happy about that at all.
Well, what's symbolic about Malone during the playoffs against Houston, where he tore his jersey and he wore it. And I thought that was kind of like symbolic of like, dude, this is the old man's last chance. He's trying to push for it. Are there players of such where you thought like you would dislike that you ended up reporting and covering and finding out like, wow, this guy's a real cool guy?
Kwame Brown. Seriously. Kwame Brown
Mr. Cavs?
He had an awful reputation, as this petulant, immature,
Cake guy.
jerky kid. Well, this was before Cake, but
Okay.
he had a lot of issues in Washington. I didn't expect him to be as smart as he is. He's a really bright kid,
Right.
very nice kid, very soft spoken. Not a great basketball player, and
Right.
clearly was
Hands of stone.
overdrafted. But I remember you felt the same way too.
Yeah, he's a nice guy. I mean, he's smarter than you expected. I mean, you got to track him down. Kwame was a difficult guy to find in the locker room after a game. My running joke was like he had a
false back in his locker
well,
room.
like in Shawshank Redemption, they have the Raquel Welch poster.
Oh,
Right. Oh, yeah.
Like he's got.
That's what I was saying, like a false back in
Peel
the
it
back of
back,
his
and
locker
Kwame's actually tunneled out of the locker room. He would disappear. I mean, the PR staff wouldn't even know where he went. He was just gone. Just poof, he would disappear.
The two things sorry.
But
go ahead.
if you could find him, he was a good interview. He was a nice guy, and he was much more articulate than you expected.
Especially, too, you jump to conclusions with a kid who, skipped college coming straight into the NBA.
Right. It's all Sean Kemp. Everyone's Sean Kemp at that point.
And, that was somebody that I was very, very surprised upon being around.
I assume most guys are decent guys. I mean, and most of them are. Some are nicer than others, but
Right.
most of them are decent enough guys, and their job isn't to they're not like a concierge, and they're not supposed to make my life ever more comfortable. They're just supposed to go in and answer questions when it's their turn to answer questions. Most of them do it. Most of them are decent enough guys.
I just feel like by observation, in the art of like interviewing people, eye contact is key. I look at people like Pau Gasol, constant eye contact.
He's the best. I mean, Pau's the
absolutely
greatest.
Right. He's
Derek Fisher. One of the things you have to do now in a locker room is like all the multimedia. A lot of times you're holding a camera while you're trying to talk to somebody, and it gets to be impersonal. You talk about eye contact.
Right.
I hate having to film people while I'm talking to them because you have to sit there and make sure they're in the viewfinder.
Right.
And you're trying to, if you're going to ask somebody a question and ask them to answer it, the least you could do is look at them while they do it.
Absolutely.
And so, but certain guys, Lamar Odom sways when he talks. He goes back and forth. So you're sitting there trying to
it's
match
his metabolic
him, right, all over the place.
Candy sugar level spiking.
Bynum was sort of all over. Derek Fisher was a rock. He never moved, so you could just hold it there like this and just talk. You go full eye contact. Pau's sort of the same way, but he's. I once saw, and I've sort of been waiting for him to get traded, and I'll eventually write about it. There was a moment in the locker room. There's a woman, I don't even know what outlet she's in, but she's in a wheelchair.
Sure.
And she's in the locker room all the time. I mean, people know her. She's very nice. She's around all the time. And one post game, Pau, who in however many years he's been here, who's done every single interview standing up.
Okay.
One of the advantages of being 7 feet tall is you can be above the microphones. It's less claustrophobic. You're not in the thing with, in the scrum with all the people. And so
right.
I go over there and whatever, and he's sitting down. Didn't say anything. He didn't make a deal out of it. But the reason he sat down, I asked about this afterwards, is because that reporter was next to his locker room, or next to his locker, and he sat down so she could hold up her microphone and ask him questions. And again, didn't make a production out of it. Didn't, do you need me to sit down? Just did it. That's the kind of guy.
Amazing.
That's the kind of guy.
That's amazing to hear.
He is.
Right. That's the kind of guy.
He is as good a person as you're going to meet. I mean, not just in the NBA or not just in sports, just in life. Pau is a fantastic person.
I mean, that's. There are a lot of guys who are good guys who would if it occurred to them, they would do something like that, or they would ask the question, or they would. But he recognizes the situation, is always so aware of the people around him and the cares about the people around him that here's somebody doing it. Just not going to make a deal out of it. But he said that gives you an idea of who he is.
Wow, I just don't want him to be traded anymore at this particular point. And being writers, have you guys found that art of being detached, or do you still get attached to particular players?
Oh, I like Pau. There's certain guys I like a lot, and I like Luke Walton. You get attached to guys in part because you get attached to guys in part because they become very good sources of information. If I needed an answer to a question, or I needed to understand something about what was going on, I could talk to him. If I needed, on Phil's old coaching staff, there were a lot of guys I could go to and get questions answered. So you miss guys on that level, but certain guys that are around for that many years, you just get to know them.
Yeah, both of us, knew well or know well can be very relative. I mean, we're not social friends with anybody on the team, but guys who've been around a while, get to know Lamar Odom reasonably well, get to know Meta as I think sort of as well as you can get to know Meta, sort of as fluid.
In his own world.
Exactly. Great
or which
guy.
World he's turned on.
Got to know Ronnie Turioff pretty well, and actually still
I've met him twice.
Ronnie's a great guy. I mean, he's a fantastic guy, and Pau's another one. Guys who were around a while, Shannon Brown got to know a little, the ones who they're year in, year out, and you see them all the time. And, you really get to know them more just before a game, just hanging around by the locker, just, talking to them without a recorder.
Give an example of like an inside look for bad player behavior or mistreating the media. Because we always get a bad rap because, the media starts this like, fuck you, bullshit.
Well, I mean, I'll say it on the record because I've told it on the record at a different podcast with the Sklar brothers. Years ago in the Dodger clubhouse, Andy Ashby flipped out at me kind of, and I never understood why. I think he thought I was loitering, like it was a 7-Eleven or something in this mostly empty clubhouse because I was waiting for a player. And he wasn't there, and it's basically just me, Ashby, and I don't know, a couple other maybe like utility infielders or something, and finally just turns to me and goes, "Do you need something?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm waiting for a player." And he's like, "All right, I just want to make sure, you're just sort of hanging around." And I'm like,
it's what we do. I mean, it's like
Right.
98% of the job is standing around and waiting.
it's like a film set
Right.
in a lot of ways. And I'm just like, dude, you've got like a 7 ERA. You've got
Shut up,
You've got
Indiana.
much
Right.
bigger things to be worrying about than what I'm doing here. You don't need to worry, first of all, that I'm waiting for you.
And you weren't dressed like trench coat mafia
No.
with a hand recorder or anything
Very
like that.
professionally,
No,
I'm sure.
uber professional at
Hair
that point.
combed, it was back when I had it, all of that. Kenyon Martin one time stared me down. It was during the
Was this pre
He's
lips
He's
tattoos
not a
on the
fun
necks?
man
No,
to
I
do.
think the lips were there at that point. It was during the 2009 series.
the Trevor Ariza.
Yeah, that year, Western Conference Finals, he either got teed up or ejected. I don't remember, but in the scrum, I asked him, what he said or what went on. He's like, nothing. And I just looked at him. I was like, nothing. He's like, nothing. And we're just sort of staring at each other. And then he ended the scrum, just kind of stopped.
Wow.
And getting stared down by Kmart is not fun. He's
He's
got
6'9",
a real
6'10"?
He's got a real 3-mile stare. He's an intimidating guy and he knows it.
Right.
But he's also always had a reputation as not the easiest guy in the world to be around.
well, I remember a story.
I've also, in fairness, had a couple conversations with him where he was actually really nice. But he probably was not in that moment in the mood to talk.
Right, absolutely. Because I've seen him be really nice to fans, and within 2 minutes, like literally, like do the Dave Chappelle hand mush to your ex-girlfriend kind of thing. And I was just like, ooh, that's a little temperamental on his end. I even recall, I don't know if you guys remember this, he and Alonzo Mourning were teammates at the Nets, and they got into fisticuffs.
Kenyon Martin's basically fought with someone everywhere he went.
Right.
As far as I know. I have to go back and catalog it exactly, but I'm pretty sure that's happened in one form or another.
Right. How about the legends like Kobe and LeBron? Are they both temperamental also?
I've spoken to
interview?
LeBron like twice, and only in the form of a giant, sort of press conference. Kobe, I think is great.
He's very articulate. That
he's
sounds so prejudiced on my end. Jesus Christ. It's supposed to be the post-racial world. Smart
well, you
guy.
were just saying what we were talking about earlier about guys who didn't go to high school. That's what you meant.
Right.
But, he was...
College. Kobe went to high school.
That's right. He didn't go to college.
Yeah.
Look at you. Look at you.
Well, I forgot. I mean,
we got to put you on blast now, B.
He can be a little prickly, Kobe, but over the last 4 or 5 years, especially, he's gotten. I mean, you have to remember too. If you made a list of athletes who get asked stupid questions more often, there couldn't be more than 4 or 5 guys above Kobe. These guys,
By virtue of how many questions he gets asked, and also how long he's been in the league,
and how many of them are stupid. These guys get asked so many bad questions and awful things and every day it's the same stuff every day. Sometimes it's shoot around, then post game, and then at practice the next day. It's constant. So sometimes when they are a little bit tough, it's deserved and you understand it, and it's like, what, we need to do a better job.
Well, I
think Kobe over the last 3 or 4 years has gotten very good with the media, and is very thoughtful, answers your questions when you ask him. If on the times that I've asked, pulled him aside, hey, can I get a little bit more about this? He always does it, and he gives you thoughtful answers to questions. Which
I like actually that he will challenge you, and that if he thinks your question's stupid, he'll let you know that it's stupid, and he leaves it up to you though to actually recover and come back. He's done that to me before, and I've come back and gotten an actual answer when he's been dismissive of something. But if something's stupid, especially at this point where he really plays up the cranky old man shtick,
right?
I'm getting too old for this shit, essentially. He's become Danny Glover in Lethal Weapon, and he doesn't care anymore. And I actually find it very funny, maybe because he doesn't do it to me too often, whether that's because he doesn't think
it's different. It's
right.
something that's not the same thing.
But I'm cool with it. I mean, I like the idea that Kobe demands that you think about what you're actually asking him if he's going to stand in front of you. I think that's completely within his rights, and I'm great with it. I have no problem with it.
Do you feel that a lot of the hatred and uber Kobeiteness is derived off uneducated fans, and now with the power to be a macho typist.
Well, some of it, that's true of
It's internet courage.
right, but
Right.
Kobe to have remained a loyal Kobe fan,
Okay.
really devoted to Kobe over the course of his entire career with the Lakers. Less so in the last 4 or 5 years, but between the Shaq Kobe stuff and Colorado and all these things required an enormous investment from fans. I mean, you really had to be that devoted to him with all these other things going on and stick with him, and
Both positive
so-
and negative type fans.
all of those things. I mean, and so to defend him against the haters and so on. I don't think there are a lot of fans of a particular athlete who are more invested in that athlete than really truly devoted fans of Kobe. And so that, I think, is why they are reflexively not just
Defensive.
They are.
Most Laker fans
Defensive.
defend Kobe on one level or another, and
Right.
the idea that Kobe should be hated or is overrated or is any of these things is absurd. He's
But
one of the greatest players of all time.
My
this is where
line
it comes from.
My line is always that the Kobe fans, I mean, just the diehard Kobeeites, consider him part basketball god, part political prisoner.
Right.
I mean, that's how
Absolutely.
they view the persecution that he goes through in their minds on a regular basis. You can for that sect of fans, you can never say enough good about Kobe. I mean, I remember at the Times a piece that I wrote in 2008 about why I thought Kobe should be MVP. I'd say 75% or so of the comments were all about how this post reveals how much I hate Kobe. And that
I remember that. I actually remember that.
All everything positive I was saying about him really was just a backhanded compliment. The idea that I was saying how much he's grown as a leader is me just saying that he sucked as a leader before. I'm like, well, do you realize how ridiculous it is for you to say that he is the same leader that he was at 17 when he came into the league? Like,
Right.
do you actually think it's a compliment to say that he has not grown one iota in the last 10 years?
Right.
Like, do you realize how limiting and stupid and how little credit that actually gives to Kobe? Like, I mean, he would be the first to tell you he's learned a lot about leadership from when he first came into the league, or even 5 years in the league, even 7 years into the league. He's learned a lot about it, and if he hadn't learned about it, it would mean that he's not half the player or leader that he actually is. I don't think he's the perfect leader, and I think at times his leadership style can grate on teammates. I think it sometimes can deflate them. I think sometimes his instinct to carry the guys
Right.
can be more deflating than it is inspiring to teammates. Because there's always that underlying message of I had to do this. He doesn't do it in a very communal way.
No, it's a very, if you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball kind
Right.
of fatherhood, right?
Yeah.
It's very bing, oh, you should have dodged that.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think his teammates, they don't find it as inspiring as fans do. When he goes into one-man gang mode.
Right.
Yeah, I really don't think that. I think
This season, his players have spoken up finally.
as his teams have gotten better, and you've got guys with more credentials, I think there are times where they do find it kind of insulting. But at the same time, I do think he's grown a lot as a leader.
So number 24, Kobe, is definitely a lot better in leadership versus number 8, Kobe.
I
like
think so.
leaps and bounds, right?
In what he'll tell you is that he's been asked before, he wasn't put in that situation, and this is what he talks about when he gets the MJ comparisons. It's you're not comparing apples to apples here. He comes into the league. He is unquestionably the man on his team. I'm sharing the floor with Shaq and all these other things. And he was older than I was. I was 17. And he does it.
And he's right.
He's right. But
Right,
it's
absolutely.
to kind of diffuse the comparisons as much as he can, even though it's so obvious that so much of his game is patterned after MJ. So, to expect him to have been in that, the leader in that situation when he was with Shaq and with those guys surrounded by Rick Fox or
not gonna
Ori
work.
and all these other guys, it was more their job to kind of
Show
keep
the
a
way.
lid on Kobe than
Right.
it was Kobe's job. Kobe's job was to lead them on the floor by playing harder than everybody else, and that was his leadership then, was playing incredibly hard, being very, very good, being hyper competitive, always making sure that he's ready to play and all that kind of stuff.
And it didn't always work.
That's what he needed
I mean,
to do.
in terms of the way teammates responded, But it was such an unusual dynamic too. I mean, you rarely have arguably the two best players in the league on the same team who could not have more opposite personalities than Kobe and Shaq.
Right.
I mean, as much as you look at the idea of, wasted potential or, what was left when that team was eventually broken up, as Kobe's pointed out, and there's some truth to this, it's amazing that they lasted together as long as they did.
Going back to Fandom, I'm completely subjective and guilty of this. I feel like I'm a Jordanite because he was the first person to put out that album.
Right.
Therefore, you need to respect that. But for some reason, I'm hard on Kobe, but I'm starting to love LeBron. Is it because is it more the team play?
LeBron is a little easier to love because LeBron fundamentally.
I don't know.
Well, I'll tell you what. LeBron is
take away the decision, take away the monster truck and pep rally that they did the day after the decision.
Fireworks and everything.
I think what Brian's talking about is style of play and demeanor.
It is fundamentally easier to like somebody who sort of inherently passes the ball, who is it's easier to like.
Team guy.
It's easier to like Magic Johnson because he's always distributing. He's always sort of in the way we think about basketball, elevating his teammates. Kobe passes the ball plenty. Last season he passed the ball as much or more than he has in years. But he is still in kind of at his core a scoring one-on-one player who just happens to have incredible knowledge and floor game and all these other things, can do whatever
if
he
he
wants.
wanted to, if he had been inclined, Kobe, I think, could have been a top flight point guard, like a Hall of Fame caliber point guard.
Absolutely.
But part of the reason people criticize LeBron is because he doesn't have, they say, that killer instinct. He doesn't, he's not going to eat your face or your mother's face or whatever in the pursuit of victory, whereas Kobe cultivates that image. Well, that guy isn't as likable as, the killer is not as likable as, the distributor. So
But I love Jordan, and Jordan is just from that mold, that killer mold.
True.
Mold.
But it's also a different era. I mean, it's a different context. It's a different, if Jordan...
And he did Space Jam.
Right.
I mean, Jordan was presented...
And Jordan never lost. And even when he did lose...
That was his...
and even when he did lose, like when you kind of think back on it, like in your head, Jordan never lost.
Well, and Jordan though was presented. It was a different media,
except for Space Jam.
It was a different media. You were able to hide a lot more of, I guess, Jordan's sort of darker side. A lot of that stuff has come out more either at the end of his career or even in retirement. Like punching Steve Kerr in the face, or some of the the gambling and the womanizing and a lot of what's gone on, that if it had
his
taken,
Hall of Fame speech, that Jordan is
that Jordan wasn't the one you saw, but that wasn't really who you saw. You saw a hyper competitive guy, but all you'd ever hear about was how he was one of them.
Right,
but all you'd ever hear about was he was one of the boys with his teammates afterwards, which he was.
Right.
But he wasn't always the easiest teammate either. I mean, if Jordan, I think
he was a brutal teammate.
Right. That's my point. If Jordan had played in this era, there's no question we'd see him differently. That doesn't necessarily mean he wouldn't have been popular. I think he would have been insanely popular. Right. I mean, he's incredibly charismatic.
Right.
And I say this as somebody who was never a huge Jordan fan, mostly because I didn't that likability wasn't there. I also found him kind of boring, like in terms of personality. I didn't find him terribly interesting. And for the most part, to be a fan of a player, I need to find that player interesting. I loved his game. He was incredible to watch.
Right.
But Jordan would have been seen differently. There's no question.
He also didn't have the issues of breaking up a team, and he didn't have, his gambling stuff and all these other things could have been more controversial than it was. It was sort of an open thing that everybody knew about, but but he didn't have Colorado in that sense. And so there are all these things that happen along Kobe's career that change the way you think of him relative to Jordan.
I was more forgiving because his father died. Therefore, you retire.
Well, but also too, there's probably only so far people want to pile on with the gambling issue with Jordan because of that belief that the gambling issue and his father's death were connected. There's always been that belief.
That would have been so much more sensationalized.
Right. Well, it would have been more sensationalized, but
Absolutely.
it would have been either more sensationalized. But I think it also there's only so much you want to pile on somebody. Maybe when you think about the idea that whenever you bring up the gambling issues, you bring up his father being murdered, and it may create a bit of an invisible wall.
Whatever line may have existed then with that,
Sure.
would not exist now.
Sure, that's true.
He'd get killed. Bad choice of terms, but I mean,
No,
everybody
absolutely.
understand what I mean. It was
So
could have picked a different.
I contacted a few of the old blog brethren, so they had some like Faith, Daniel,
Wow.
all of them, and they had some questions. And we're also going to play a game called Esoteric True or False.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll start you off real nice and easy first. Red Auerbach is the Barry Gordy or Clive Davis of finding talent in the NBA. True or false?
I don't necessarily know enough about the history of how the Celtics were formed, but
Okay.
but I almost feel like how visionary do you have to have been to like pick Bill Russell? Because he seemed to me pretty awesome.
But he was the first guy to link up the
He
first.
did manage to have like 17 Hall of Famers a year.
Right.
on his
Right.
team.
I mean, I take away the racial element
Component,
of it,
right.
but I'm just saying, like, in terms of looking at Bill Russell play and go, he's good. Like, I'm an idiot. I can figure that out.
I think they were more playing on the fact that he had so many Hall of Famers
Right.
in his roster.
I mean, I will say this is where that question gets to the whole thing when Red Auerbach used to complain about, Phil only wins because he has the best players.
Right.
Shut up.
Dude,
Mush.
really?
Dude, some of those.
Really?
I remember I looked up one time. One of Red's teams, I don't remember which year, had I think 9 guys who were, and forget Hall of Famers. They were part of that 50 best list. I'm like, Red could have gone to the movies during games,
Right,
and these
right.
guys would have won.
Do an
The
iPad
pictures,
coach.
they would have called it back then.
Yeah, I don't. That's what I'm saying with him. I mean, obviously he knew boatloads about basketball and was a genius, but in terms of picking that talent, I mean, I don't even know. In the sense of, I don't understand. I think
it was.
I don't know how
it was
the
probably
league
better.
was.
I'm willing to say again with that sort of limited knowledge, he was very good at finding the talent. I don't know how good a coach he was because he had all the talent.
Well, I was going to say I don't know necessarily how hard it was to find the talent and whatever because I don't know how the league was structured, what the rules were, and building teams.
And it's a different league in terms of controlling the egos and things like that. It was a lot easier to do that,
Right, 'cause everyone was
back
more
in the
humble.
day. Right. Well, not even that they were humble; they had no leverage. This is back before players really
Excellent
had the
point.
leverage to go do anything. You're sort of at the mercy of Mr.
But-
Auerbach, one way or the other.
He had. I'll call him Barry Gordy. Why not?
Sure.
I'll call him Clive Davis.
Phil Jackson wants to be the Rick Rubin of Def Jam, comparably for the Lakers.
I'm going to say false.
Why is that?
I don't think he actually wants to do those things.
What is it that,
I don't
that
know
you
what
feel
Phil
Jackson
wants to do, but I mean, Phil's.
I'm not 100%. I'm not 100% sure Phil knows what he wants to do right
Phil
now.
isn't. Phil's
Fair
tree. Phil has no tree. Phil's one of the only guys in the league who has been as accomplished as he is. Pop's got a tree.
Right.
Riley. I mean, all these guys have these roots or branches or whatever.
Pop
you
has
call
like
it.
a forest.
Right.
Right.
And this is something that bothers Phil and to no end. But none of his guys have ever gone anywhere. Brian Shaw still doesn't have a job. I mean, he might
Kurt
by the end of the
Rambis
summer.
hasn't done
Kurt
much.
Tried it and failed miserably. Clemens had one shot at it. Frank Hamblin was a career assistant. All these guys, Phil does not have in part because he kept he wanted to keep his guys all the time, but none of his
Might have
guys
been more like a
ever gone on.
Zappa with Beefheart or something. Like he's just had a hard time finding commercial acceptance with his
It's too late for him to
proteges.
create a tree.
Okay.
But I don't know. I don't know what Phil wants to.
I'm not 100% Phil quite knows what he wants right now. I mean, this is without
definitely doesn't-
talking
I
to
believe that he
anybody
doesn't
close to
wanna coach anymore.
Yeah,
He's not
I've
gonna
thought
coach.
that for a while. I mean, people forget he had to be cajoled into coming back for 2011. I mean, when we were at his exit interview and he said that he was leaning towards retirement, this did not look like he was making a ploy to try to get as much money for his next deal or, didn't want to get a pay cut, whatever.
It was a wrap. He was done.
He looked done. He looked absolutely done. And, he had to be talked back into it by a lot of people. And, I mean, I don't think he wants to coach.
And I think he fully regrets it. I think he fully regrets
He looked
it.
during that season to me like he thought he made a mistake. I never asked him, but that's just my impression being around him a lot that year. He looked to me like somebody who realized that he made a mistake.
Now, you guys have to choose either or.
Okay.
David Lee Roth or Sammy Hagar.
David Lee Roth.
Why?
Sammy Hagar sucks.
Oh, you 812 was a little good though.
Sammy Hagar
It was a B minus.
sucks. And Van Halen sucked from the moment he arrived.
Yeah, I mean, it's a serious case where the Van Halen brothers were really just one person, and David Lee Roth was just a mega
If
comment.
you are a person who chooses Sammy Hagar in that equation,
You might as well be
and
choosing
it
Gary Sharon.
reveals
I don't get you.
fundamental flaws in your character
Okay.
and your ability to understand anything.
Absolutely.
100%
It's not even close to a question.
Okay, which duo is better? Scorcese, DeNiro, Scorcese, DiCaprio.
Scorcese, DeNiro, but Scorcese, DiCaprio ain't bad at all, and Wolf of Wall Street looks very entertaining in the trailer.
Right. You know what? I think really what's supreme
Scorsese,
right
De
now-
Niro made more good movies together.
Right.
I think De Niro, Scorsese, from an actor-director relationship, just taking that purely in a vacuum, they've been extremely good. I think DiCaprio has been miscast a little more in Scorsese movies than De Niro was.
And you're getting Scorsese, De Niro. You're getting Scorsese when, in his prime. You're getting
when the industry was different.
You're getting 28-year-old MJ.
In the 70s,
to,
in the
create an
70s,
career.
in the 70s, the film industry encouraged Scorsese to do the type of movies that, Taxi Driver was considered a commercial movie,
Right. Today, that would be an ultimate cult.
right,
No distribution.
Yeah, it was just different. I mean, it was just, even up to Goodfellas, it was just different. They had a few clunkers.
Casino, I thought was great.
Yeah, they had a few clunkers. I'm not a huge New York fan, but yes, but
Okay.
they're both good duos.
Ultimate Jimmys, Fallon or Kimmel?
Fallon.
I prefer Fallon.
Because
I think he's funnier. I don't mind Jimmy Kimmel. I used to dislike Jimmy Kimmel a lot more than I do now. But I kind of like Fallon's...
the Sarah years.
He's still a little awkward, like in what he does. Like there's still a little bit of that kind of... it's a little strange that people want me to be doing this, that I'm on TV, that I kind of like that he kind of giggles at his own jokes.
I find him weirder in a good way.
Let's get weird.
I find him weird in a good way.
I liked it. It was Fallon who couldn't keep a straight face in the cowbell sketch.
Yes.
For example.
Yeah.
I like that he laughed his way through that. He couldn't.
He also does incredible impressions.
He was great in Almost Famous. I don't know if you remember him. He was like one of the band people from the label to try to stray him away.
About that. Yeah.
Yeah, he was in Almost Famous, and
don't remember.
I just pictured funny Fallon.
I remember reading it, but Andy mentioned like the when he does Dylan
Or Morrison.
when he does Springsteen. Those are hysterical.
I like his Springsteen a lot.
Yeah.
Quite a bit. The other Jimmys, Hendrix or Page?
Hendrix.
Why?
He's the gold standard. He's as creative as any guitarist I've ever heard.
Left-handed.
Left-handed, the showmanship on stage. If you ever watch like Live at Monterey, I have watched him. The opening that they did that Live at Monterey performance, or it's Monterey Pop Festival. The
Right.
album is Live at Monterey, but his performance of Killing Floor, I have watched that over and over and over just to watch Hendrix's showmanship. I mean, from what I read, there was The Who and Hendrix, neither one of them wanted to go after the other. And they apparently almost got into a fight over it backstage, and they flipped a coin, and Hendrix had to follow The Who. And he said, well, if I have to follow these guys, I'm going to pull out all the stops, and I'm going to basically blow every single performer out of the water. And this was really when he became introduced to American audiences, and he just crushed it. He absolutely crushed. Hendrix is, for me, like creatively one of my heroes.
Anything to add to that?
I just think I love Zeppelin. I was a little late getting to my Zeppelin phase, but Zeppelin always towed that line, especially as they went along. They really towed that line between kind of awesome and a little bit silly. Occasionally crossing it towards silly when they get into all like the
Right.
Lord of the Rings shit and whatever.
Right.
But-
If you've seen the actual movie, the song remains the same.
Right, with like
That's what Brian's
17 split screens and all that. Hendrix never got silly. Hendrix was always awesome.
Yeah, that was almost
Jimmy
like...
Page is pretty badass, don't get me wrong, but Hendrix is better than Page.
And honestly, Hendrix had that front man appeal to him. It was just
Well, you know, it's funny. Like during that Killing Floor performance, I also realized, you know, because again, I've watched it so many times. I realized like he's playing lead guitar and rhythm guitar at the same time while singing, while chewing gum.
right.
Like, and that is not easy to sing while you're actually chewing gum and doing all, you know, you can't walk and chew gum. It's the oldest joke in the world.
Right.
He's playing the lead and the rhythm guitar while singing while chewing gum. That's amazing.
Chris Rock or Eddie Murphy?
Chris Rock.
Why Chris Rock?
More political.
Relevance in the media and social tide.
Yeah, I just think Eddie Murphy at his height was more rock star, I think, and he was really, really funny. But I think Chris Rock's comedy was more meaningful. I think it probed more. It was more interesting.
I'll give Eddie Murphy credit though, because they, you know, like you talked about sort of Jordan, and like you kind of grow up in like
came out first?
McDonald's fries, for example. Always, I don't eat a lot of fries anymore, like fast food stuff.
Right.
But you know, they hit that certain flavor center because like that's what you grew up on. Eddie Murphy is kind of like that because, you know, Comedians is one of the first albums that I'm pretty sure I shouldn't have been listening to, and that I kind of memorized. Like I can,
Delirious.
Delirious.
you know, all
Crazy,
when
insane.
as a comedian, when you hear people do that, that's sort of the first one that I kind of memorized, and so
It was, I mean, he was great. I mean, Eddie Murphy at his height was unbelievable. I just think Chris Rock is a little, I think a little more George Carlin, you know, a little more, you know, even though he came before him, you know, breaking out a little
Funny
more
and
Louis C.K.
satirical.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's more to take away from it than Eddie Murphy's. Plus, you know, Eddie Murphy's, there's a very 80s feel to it. Like it is
Absolutely.
You go back
it is
and you watch
exceptionally
Delirious.
homophobic.
What's he
Right,
wearing?
right, yeah,
What's he
definitely.
wearing in the Delirious album? It's like
wearing,
a
like,
red leather.
jumpsuit.
Very
essentially.
tight. He
yeah.
turned around
Yeah.
and flexed his butt and was like, "Girls, I know you guys like think I'm
Yeah.
fine, this and that." That's where I thought, like, okay, this guy is revealing the black youth. Had a mic where with Richard Pryor was kind of like,
Chris Rock is
intangible.
closer. I mean, I hate when this happens because it always sounds like you're comparing one black comic to another. But I mean,
No.
in terms of stylistically and I think purpose, Chris Rock, although I imagine he would say he owes a big debt to Eddie Murphy and, you know, probably looked up to him a lot, and that I think he's much closer to Richard Pryor in terms of what he sets out to do when he's on stage.
excellent point, because he had like a bullet point of things that were topical.
Right.
And he correlated, and then, you know, the radio
I think
art
there were more taboos that Chris Rock, I think, was willing to address when he was on there and looking to, versus Eddie Murphy, who was just really looking to be hysterically funny. And, you know, Chris Rock also too had, I think I've read this before, I know he had a different experience on SNL. I mean, you know, Eddie Murphy was the star and Chris Rock had a difficult time finding his niche. I think he was dissatisfied by that. And I think
I don't remember a single Chris Rock
liner.
bit. Like, what was
Nat X? Wasn't that one of
I
them?
remember nothing.
Oh, from Saturday
Yeah.
Night Live? Yeah, Nat X was one. I think he played like this struggling waiter.
Yeah, I mean,
that got written off after
that's
2
not
tries.
Right,
Like,
so
I
it's like-
remember literally nothing of him.
And I remember like reading, if memory serves, you know, Chris Rock, when he started getting back into stand-up, and that, you know, he did like CB4, which didn't really do that well.
With
And-
Louis C.K., by the way.
Right. And, you know, didn't do that great. And well, actually, they've been connected a while. They were involved with Pootie Tang together.
Right.
And
Way to go. Look at that IMDb, Chris Rock.
and you know, Chris Rock, I think, was really using comedy to reinvent
Like James
himself.
Lipton.
You know,
Let's talk about Pootie Tang.
Right.
you know, he was using it to, you know, reinvent himself and really break through and establish, establish really what he could bring to the table. Whereas Eddie Murphy was, again, just sort of extending that rock star persona, and he was hysterical. Again, at his height, Eddie Murphy was awesome.
Plug 1, 2, TV.